Some girls dream of being rescued by a prince. I was bought by a king whose crown was made of blood and whose castle was built on secrets that could destroy us both. Dawn settled over Brooklyn, its pale light filtering through the grimy window and spilling across my study notes, still dusted with chalk. My name is Sienna Morales, 22 years old, a senior architecture student at Pratt Institute, and a part-time barista at a small cafe on Fifth Avenue, barely earning enough to survive and to care for my father. Ordinary dreams, parties, dates, weekend trips have never belonged to me. Instead, my life is a schedule packed with classes and 15 or 16-hour shifts that leave my hands aching and my eyes red from exhaustion. Yet I never complain. The apartment my father and I live in is no more than 300 square feet, peeling walls, creaking floors, the smell of damp mixing with the bitter scent of roasted coffee I brew to mask the decay around us. My father, Miguel Morales, 56, once a structural engineer, now sits slumped at the rickety dining table, his hair peppered with gray, his hands trembling, the bottle beside him, his only faithful companion. His vacant eyes flicker toward me from time to time, but never long enough to focus. The rent has been overdue for 3 weeks. The utility bills remain unopened, and his promises to find work and pay off our debts have evaporated like the alcohol on his breath. I drop my backpack to the floor. The sharp stench of liquor hits my nose, and my heart twists with a mixture of pity and resentment. I've grown used to fighting my battles alone, keeping my place in school, paying the rent, buying our food, but my father's helplessness now feels like a weight pressing down on my shoulders. A debt I never agreed to bear. I move toward the kitchen, my fingers brushing against dirty plates and half-burned cigarettes. And I can't help thinking about the days when my father built skyscrapers, bridges, structures meant to last forever before my mother died and everything collapsed. My presence in this cramped apartment has become an attempt to fill the emptiness left by his failures, to hold together the fragments of a family that once believed in hope. And then came the knock at the door, loud, relentless. Not the kind of knock that expects an answer, but the kind that pounds straight into your chest, warning that the world outside is about to break in. I turned to my father, saw fear flash across his weary face, and knew that whatever waited beyond that door was not a simple conversation or a casual threat. My name is Sienna Morales, a girl both fragile and unyielding, living in a world where a single wrong choice can cost blood, where life and death are decided by people I never imagined would cross my path. And I understood, with a cold certainty, that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. The apartment my father and I live in is a living testament to the slow ruin of time and the weight of mistakes that never stopped echoing. The walls are cracked, patches of paint peeled away to reveal the dull gray cement beneath. The wooden floor creaks and groans under my steps as if to remind me that this place, once a home, has long become nothing more than a shelter for what remains. Every piece of furniture is worn and mismatched, the table chipped, the chairs uneven, and the narrow bed just wide enough to hold the thin mattress my father and I share. On the kitchen shelf stand empty liquor bottles, expired spice jars, and a few packets of instant noodles, their wrappers wrinkled and damp from the humidity, all blending into a stifling mix of sour and moldy smells that seem to cling to every breath. My study papers, textbooks, and backpack lie scattered across the floor alongside unpaid bills and debt notices taped to the wall with brittle, yellowed tape daily reminders that we are living on the edge of collapse. The weak light from a single overhead bulb fails to chase away the shadows. Instead, it only reveals them more clearly, carving out the traces of a life that has drifted without purpose. A life where my father's helplessness has left its mark in every corner and on every object. Each morning I wake to the sounds from the hallway, children laughing, hurried footsteps of neighbors rushing to work, then return to the heavy silence of our apartment, broken only by the sound of my father pouring another drink or the dull clatter of our old pots and pans. I have learned to move softly to keep the fragile floorboards from splitting further, to divide the cramped space into corners for studying, cooking, sleeping, and even a small spot to breathe without feeling suffocated. Meals are usually instant noodles or stale bread, sometimes leftovers from the cafe where I work. I eat without thinking of taste, just to fill my stomach and gather enough strength for another long shift. We have no comfort beyond what is absolutely necessary. Some days we lose water or electricity because the bills haven't been paid. And every time that happens, I rush to find a way out before the landlord knocks or the utility company calls again. Each day passes in a cycle of work, study, survival, and cleaning the mess my father leaves behind stains on the floor. Unwashed dishes, crumpled lottery tickets, and bits of foil scattered like fragments of his broken pride. I often stand by the window and look down at the streets of Brooklyn, the steady flow of cars, the people on their way to work, the tall buildings rising above it all, like a world that exists apart, one that runs on order, rules, and opportunities. Meanwhile, I remain trapped in a loop with no exit. Yet even in exhaustion, I refuse to fall. I've taught myself to smile at customers in the cafe, to sound calm when answering the landlord's impatient calls, and to whisper silently to myself that someday I will leave this place behind. I will no longer watch my father drown in his failures and his bottles. I will build a life of my own, a place where peace and hope are not luxuries but ordinary things. But every moment I spend in this apartment reminds me that the past and present of our family still weigh heavily on my shoulders. That poverty is not only a lack of money but a quiet, unrelenting burden of the spirit, one I must learn to carry with my small, trembling hands. I walked over to the dining table where my father, Miguel Morales, sat hunched in the old chair with half a bottle of liquor remaining beside him. The weak yellow light from the bulb above fell across his aged, ashen face, deep wrinkles carved into his skin, his red-rimmed eyes unfocused, staring through me rather than at me. I took a deep breath, forcing back the surge of anger rising in my chest, and spoke, my voice taut and trembling. "Father, did you go to your project interview today? We need money for the rent. The utility bills are waiting." He let out a dry, hollow laugh, empty as if the world had abandoned him. "Sienna, you're home early. Why do you look so tired?" "I'm trying. But it's not that simple," he said, his voice lost amid the stench of alcohol and the cluttered room. My chest tightened. Tears threatened to spill. But I could not cry, could not let him see my weakness. I rested my hand on the table, looking at the empty bottles and unpaid bills, and said, my voice heavy with exhaustion and frustration, "Father, we cannot continue like this. 3 weeks overdue on rent. Mrs. Henderson could evict us any moment. We have no other choice. You have to act." He looked at me, those brown eyes so much like mine, filled with a remorse I had never seen before. "You think it's that simple? Sienna, you think I am not trying. I've done everything I could. But some debts follow you your whole life. You know that." I clenched my fists, the mixture of anger and sorrow roiling inside me. "You have to try. You cannot keep hiding, gambling, hoping luck will save us. We need a plan. You must work, go to interviews, stop drinking." Silence settled over us, broken only by the clinking of his hand on the bottle as his voice fell lower. Almost a whisper. "You don't understand. Sienna, there are things I have lost, debts I cannot repay with money or effort. I once built beautiful things, buildings, bridges, structures I thought would last forever, but now they are only memories. A part of life that died with your mother, with the past I can never reclaim." I stood there, my hand resting on the old chair, my chest aching with a mix of pity and disappointment. And for the first time in my life I spoke words I had never said aloud. "Father, you must stand up. You must fight for us. You cannot let fear and alcohol consume this life. I am too exhausted from carrying everything alone." He lowered his head, shoulders trembling, a flicker of awareness glimmering in his eyes. Yet he returned almost immediately to the bottle as if seeking refuge. "You do not know. Sienna, the debts follow me, follow our lives, follow everything I have lost. Some things cannot be repaired." I ceded, turning toward the window, looking out over the bustling streets of Brooklyn, the sounds of life outside reminding me that the world continues to move, and I must remain steadfast to live and protect what remains. I turned back to him once more, my voice gentler but resolute. "You are not alone. I will stand by your side. But you must take responsibility for your life, for us, There is no longer any reason to hide. Do you understand? Miguel Morales remained silent, his eyes vacant yet slightly clearer than before. A fleeting moment before he sank back into the bottle. And I knew that from this point forward, I would bear more than ever before, not only for him, but for myself in the future I had never dared to imagine. The knock at the door came in rapid, insistent bursts, each strike like an urgent warning that made my heart lurch and seemed to rattle the cramped apartment with every blow. I jumped to my feet, a shiver running down my spine, and turned to look at my father, seeing him panicked, hands trembling as he gripped the chair for support, eyes wide as if silently pleading with me not to open the door, not to face whatever was coming. But curiosity and a flicker of instinct to protect drew me closer. I took a deep breath, my hand shaking as I approached the door. The pounding continued, not polite or measured, but as if intent on breaking through every barrier. And I knew that whoever was outside cared nothing for our fear. My fingers touched the cold metal of the doorknob, a chill spreading through my fingertips, my heart hammering so loudly it felt like I could hear each beat. When I opened the door, 3 men stepped inside, their appearances meticulously groomed in sleek black suits, hair slicked with rain, their presence imposing and predator-like, eyes scanning the room with unmistakable disdain. The first man was massive, muscles coiled under his suit, his face hardened, scars etched into his hands and neck, telling stories of violence he had enacted before, each step deliberate on the creaking floor. The second was leaner but no less lethal, his gaze sharp, carrying the weight of battles no one wanted to remember. But it was the third man who nearly took my breath away, impossibly handsome. Black hair slicked back, piercing pale blue eyes so cold they made me shiver, every feature carved as if by a master Italian sculptor, his form powerful yet fluid, each step radiating absolute confidence and control, the tailored suit hugging every line of his body, speaking of a life never lacking anything. He paused, his icy blue eyes sweeping over me, making me feel scrutinized, assessed, like prey before the alpha predator. And I realized his presence was not merely to collect a debt but to test both my father and me. Miguel Morales. His voice rang out, warm yet sharp, with a hint of European accent. I called many times, but you never answered. My father lifted his head slightly, his face pale, hands trembling on the table. Trying to steady himself, I did not expect you to come here. The man's soft but commanding laugh cut through the tension. When someone owes me $2 million and then disappears, I take a personal interest. I stood beside my father, feeling as if I had been swept into a storm with no choices, my heart pounding, my breath shallow, my whole body trembling. The man stepped closer, his gaze fixed on me. You are Sienna Morales, 22. An architecture student at Pratt Institute, working part-time at a cafe on 5th Avenue. Your father owes me, and you have not been uninvolved since he failed to repay on time. I froze, unable to speak, for he knew every detail of our lives, from long shifts to unpaid bills, as if we had been watched for years. My father tried to intervene. She has nothing to do with my business. But the man merely lifted a finger to signal silence, his cold blue eyes still fixed on me. When he owes me, his daughter becomes part of the debt. I am here not just to collect, but to ensure the lesson is learned fully. His presence, calm yet absolute in authority, both terrified and captivated me, making me realize that from this very moment, my life had irrevocably changed, that the choices made from the instant the door opened would determine the future of myself, my father, and everything I had ever known. The man with the cold blue eyes stepped further into the room, his measured footsteps echoing against the creaking wooden floor, each one tightening the knot in my chest until my heart felt ready to burst. He stopped across from my father, arms folded, his voice deep and razor-sharp yet without a hint of theatrical anger. Miguel Morales, $2 million. You have 3 days to pay. If not, I'll collect by other means. My father froze, color draining from his face, his trembling hands clutching the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His voice stammered. I can explain. I'll pay. I just need more time. The man's eyes never left him. A mixture of contempt and authority that cut through every excuse and shred of fear. Explain. You've spent 3 months explaining by staying silent and disappearing. Now is the time to act. Your daughter is already within your circle of responsibility. I know everything about her, and I suggest you remember that. I stood motionless, my pulse thundering. A cold wave spreading through my veins as I realized my life was no longer my own, and that every wrong move could demand payment in blood. My father exhaled, his voice low, worn, defeated. $2 million. I don't have that kind of money. I've lost everything gambling. Loans. Mistakes I can't undo. The man lifted a single finger, signaling for silence, then turned his gaze directly to me. His eyes, glacial and penetrating, felt as if they could strip me bare. Sienna Morales, daughter of this man. From this moment on, you are part of the debt he created. He cannot pay, and you may have to pay for him. We don't negotiate with failures. We speak only with those who understand the value of life and death. My chest tightened painfully. My legs shook beneath me. My body locked in place. He began to circle the table slowly, his eyes scanning every inch of our small apartment, the shattered bottles, crumpled bills, stacks of books, all forming a portrait of despair and ruin. $2 million. 3 days. That is the only chance you have to avoid consequences I don't need to describe, he said, his voice calm but absolute, each word heavy as a hammer striking my heart. My father looked at me, eyes red and glistening, filled with guilt, fear, and the quiet understanding that he had nothing left to give. I clenched my fists, tension crawling up my arms like ice, realizing that no one could save us now except myself or the man who had just rewritten the rules of our lives. He turned back toward me, his blue eyes fixed, his tone low yet merciless. You have 3 days to prove your worth, or face methods of collection that will not be pleasant. Your father cannot repay, which means you might become the collateral. Do you understand? My lips parted, but no sound came out. My heartbeat was wild, and a chill ran down my spine as the weight of his words sank in. In that instant, I knew that everything I thought I knew about safety, freedom, and peace had been shattered. From this moment forward, they were no longer rights but battles I would have to fight for every single second. This debt was not just about money, it was about survival, about life itself, about choosing between endurance and destruction. The man turned, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the door. He raised one hand slightly in farewell, his gaze still locked on mine, a silent reminder that his warning was not an empty threat that the next 3 days would decide the fate of my father, of me, and of whatever remained of a life already undone by failure and despair. When the door finally closed behind him, the apartment fell into suffocating stillness, broken only by my father's ragged breathing, the stench of alcohol, and the lingering dread in the air. And deep within that silence, I felt the chill of something dark awakening, the sense that my life had just crossed into a place where power and danger, love and fear, life and death would soon become indistinguishable. The next morning, I stepped out of our small apartment with a heaviness in my chest so deep it felt like each step dragged the weight of the night's despair behind me. The backpack slung over my shoulder was heavy with books, study papers, and the stack of bills I planned to use as proof of my father's financial condition. The city of New York pulsed around me loud, alive, indifferent while I moved through it like a ghost. A fine drizzle clung to my hair and shoulders, mingling with the invisible tears that burned behind my eyes as I thought of the 3-day deadline, the impossible $2 million, and my father's anxious face in that cramped, airless apartment. I stepped onto the sidewalk, staring up at the skyscrapers shimmering through the morning mist, their glass facades gleaming like distant promises. Each passerby seemed to underline the gulf between their world and mine, the world of stability and power built on money, and my world, small and trembling beneath the weight of a debt I hadn't created, but was now forced to bear. The bank loomed ahead, a tower of glass and steel, its immaculate order radiating a kind of authority that made me feel even smaller. I drew in a long breath and walked inside. The hiss of the automatic doors closing behind me sounded like a verdict, sealing me off from everything familiar. At the counter, the polite but practiced smile of the bank employee only deepened my sense of alienation. It was the kind of smile given to people who didn't belong here. I forced myself to speak calmly, to tell the story clearly, to present the documents that proved we weren't irresponsible, just two people crushed under the weight of mistakes and misfortune. My voice trembled as I explained the debt, the 3-day ultimatum from the man with the cold blue eyes, and the desperation that had brought me there. The middle-aged woman behind the desk listened quietly, nodding from time to time, but in her eyes flickered something between pity and skepticism, and I felt my fragile hope unraveling. She flipped through my papers, frowned, then shook her head, her tone even but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss. Based on your current debt-to-income ratio, we can't approve any additional loans. In fact, some of your existing accounts are already flagged as overdue. Granting more would be too risky." The words landed like stones. My chest constricted, and for a moment it felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Every effort, every plan, every ounce of hope I had clung to collapsed in a heartbeat. I asked quickly, almost pleading, "Is there any other option? Could I use collateral, maybe find a guarantor?" She shook her head, her expression softening with genuine regret. But her voice remained steady. "Perhaps a family member could help, but even that would require strict review." I lowered my gaze, numbness spreading through my body, a mix of anger, sorrow, and helplessness swirling inside me. It was as if every door had slammed shut at once. When I stepped back outside, the rain had grown colder, sharper, the droplets sinking into my skin like tiny reminders that time was slipping away. 3 days, that was all we had left, and I still had no way to save my father or myself from the reach of the man with the piercing blue eyes. Around me, the city surged forward, cars rushing past, people hurrying to their destinations, life continuing as though my world weren't collapsing. But I stood there, frozen in place, trapped in the stillness of my own despair, knowing that every decision from this moment on would determine not just our future, but whether we would even have one at all. I stepped into the sleek black car driven by Marco, my heart pounding so hard I could feel every beat against my chest as we left the narrow streets of Brooklyn behind and headed toward the outer edges of Manhattan, where luxury homes rose like fortresses of glass and marble. The city slowly receded in the rearview mirror, giving way to wide lawns, manicured hedges, and rows of expensive cars parked before sprawling mansions whose glass windows shimmered with the reflection of daylight. I sat in silence, eyes wide, throat dry, trying to absorb every detail without being completely overwhelmed. Marco said nothing, his focus fixed on the road ahead, and I knew the silence wasn't just about concentration, it was deliberate, a way to heighten the gravity of the meeting that awaited me. When the iron gates swung open, a grand estate came into view, its facade a blend of modern precision and classical artistry. Every line, every carved surface spoke of wealth and control. The gardens were perfectly trimmed, the fountain at the center murmuring softly beside a small artificial waterfall that glistened like a piece of living architecture. It was the kind of place I had only seen in magazines or textbooks, not somewhere I ever imagined standing in person. Marco stopped the car at the entrance. 2 security guards in tailored black suits stepped forward, their eyes sharp and watchful, scanning the surroundings with the kind of focus that made it clear nothing escaped. "Notice here." I stepped out slowly, each footfall feeling like a step into another world, one of immaculate beauty, danger, and excess where I, a student from Brooklyn dressed in jeans and a hoodie, felt so small I could almost disappear. The front doors opened, and Adrian appeared. He was tall, wearing a dark fitted suit that seemed sculpted for him, his black hair slicked back perfectly, his pale blue eyes cold yet commanding. Every movement carried the kind of grace that only comes with power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it's already understood. He greeted me with a slight nod, his voice deep yet warmer than I expected, and the sound of it sent an uneasy pull through me, a mix of fear and fascination. I realized, standing there, that he wasn't just a rich man. He was power itself, and with a single word he could decide whether my father lived or died. We walked through the grand foyer, where a high vaulted ceiling soared above polished white marble floors that reflected the glittering light of crystal chandeliers. Masterpieces hung on the walls, paintings whose brushstrokes spoke of heritage, of old money, of control passed down through generations. My footsteps echoed softly, each sound amplified by the emptiness around me, until I felt as though I was being measured by every surface, every unseen eye in the room. It wasn't a visit. It was an initiation, a test, a crossing into Adrian's world, where mistakes were punished and obedience was survival. As he led me past the luxurious sitting rooms and into a vast library with shelves stretching to the ceiling, I could not help but feel both awe and dread. The wealth, the precision, the quiet dominance of this place, it all belonged to him, and I understood with a clarity that chilled me that from this moment on, every choice I made, every breath I took, would exist within his reach. I had entered his orbit, a world I had once only dared to glimpse in, dreams too fragile to name, and now, there was no turning back. We stepped into a vast living room with a high ceiling where natural light streamed through enormous glass windows, illuminating every polished surface and casting a soft glow across the luxurious but sterile interior. The air smelled faintly of cedar and wealth, of power too concentrated to breathe easily. Priceless paintings adorned the walls, each one a silent reminder that I was standing in a world ruled not by kindness or morality, but by control, by those who had everything and those who had nothing left to lose. Adrian stood across from me, tall and poised, his dark suit fitting him with effortless precision, his pale blue eyes sharp enough to strip away every defense I had left. My heart pounded wildly, my breath caught between fear and disbelief as he took a slow step toward me, his voice deep, even, and impossible to ignore. "Sienna, we need to discuss the matter of your father's debt. He cannot pay. And as I said before, you are now part of that responsibility." I froze, my throat dry, a wave of panic tightening my chest. This wasn't a conversation, it was a sentence. He motioned toward the leather chair before him. "Sit," he said quietly, before taking the seat opposite mine, his eyes never leaving my face. "I'm offering a proposal," he continued, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "A way to resolve everything without further harm. You would live safely, continue your education, be protected, but in return, I require your complete cooperation." My body tensed, and I could barely swallow, every nerve screaming at me to run even as something deeper held me in place. Adrian leaned slightly forward, his words deliberate, measured. "You will become my wife. Sienna, this is not a casual proposition, nor a conventional relationship. It is an agreement to protect your father, to shield you from the consequences of his debt. You will have everything you need, a home, an education, security, but in return, you will belong to me, and your duty will be to fulfill what is necessary to protect your family and me." My heart seemed to stop. Every word he spoke fell with the precision of a blade, cutting into the fragile illusion of choice I thought I had. My voice trembled as I forced the words out. You want me to marry you, to pay for my father's debt?" He nodded once, slow and certain, those icy eyes never softening. "Yes. Sienna, this is the only way to ensure both you and your father remain safe. If you refuse, the consequences will go far beyond money. They will concern survival." I lowered my head, my breath trembling as tears stung the corners of my eyes. My mind spun, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Adrian's tone deepened, his words steady but edged with the kind of finality that only power can grant. "I am not forcing you," he said softly, though every syllable carried the weight of inevitability. "I'm giving you the only choice that guarantees safety for you and your father. You can refuse, of course, but I promise the outcome of that choice will be far worse. The decision is yours. Consider it carefully. There will not be another offer." I lifted my head, meeting his gaze, and for a moment, the world fell silent. His eyes held mine cold, clear, unrelenting, but behind that chill, there was something darker, magnetic, an unspoken truth that he understood every fear, every flicker of resistance within me. Power radiated from him not just through wealth or position, but through presence, the unshakable control of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. My pulse thundered in my ears as I realized that from this moment forward, nothing would ever be the same. My choices were no longer about what I wanted, but about survival, my father's, and my own. I was standing on the threshold of a new world, one woven from danger and desire, freedom and captivity, where power dictated every heartbeat. And as the air between us thickened with silence, I understood, with a quiet, aching clarity, that my next words would decide the rest of my life. I took a step back, trying to suppress the wave of fear and panic rising inside me, my voice trembling but steady with defiance. You can't possibly think I'll just accept this. I'm not property to be traded, and I will not spend my life under the control of a man I barely know. Adrian's pale blue eyes stayed fixed on me, not angry, but piercing, assessing, as if waiting to see whether my conviction could withstand the weight of his silence. It struck me then that his power didn't come only from money or influence, but from something deeper, the ability to make people confront their own fear, to force them to choose. I drew in a deep breath, clutching the edge of the chair before me, and spoke again, my voice gaining strength. You can offer safety, wealth, and everything I've never had, but I won't agree to become part of a debt in the way you've described. If you truly want to help my father, we can find another solution, a compromise that doesn't cost me my freedom. Adrian's lips curved slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile, but his gaze remained sharp. He lifted his hand, pointing toward me, his voice low and calm yet carrying the weight of command. Sienna, you have every right to resist. I don't deny that. But understand this time, and your father's survival won't wait for pride or principle. I'm not threatening you. I'm stating facts. This is the only path that guarantees his safety, and yours. I swallowed hard, fear tightening around my throat, but somewhere beneath it, a flicker of determination began to burn. My voice steadied. I can work. I can contribute. Negotiate. Find a way to repay the debt through my skills and effort, but I won't accept being collateral. If you truly respect me and want to protect my father, then you'll listen. You'll negotiate a fair solution, not force me into a marriage I never agreed to. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering, his face sculpted into calm precision. Yet behind that composure, I caught a trace of something else: curiosity, perhaps even respect. He nodded once, his tone thoughtful. You stand before me without flinching. You speak your mind, even when you know the risk. That interests me. I didn't expect you to fight back, but I don't underestimate the power of negotiation. In my world, everything has value, and so do you. I exhaled slowly, tension coursing through me, a strange mixture of fear and relief washing over my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the desperate girl trapped beneath her father's mistakes. I felt like someone with a voice, with a choice however fragile, and the right to demand respect. My voice quivered but carried conviction. If you truly want to cooperate, we can find another way. I can work alongside you, help repay the debt gradually, even assist with your business ventures. As long as they're legitimate, I'll stay where you decide if it means protection, but not as your wife. Not as a bargaining chip in an arrangement I never consented to. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his tone deepened. Sharp and deliberate. You're negotiating with me to my face, challenging the terms I've set for your life and your father's. That's bold, and it matters. I'll listen. But understand, every word you speak, every move you make, will directly affect his fate and your own. My heart tightened, but beneath the weight of his warning, I felt something else resolve. I had managed, somehow, to carve the faintest path toward a new kind of bargain, a fragile chance to save my father without losing myself entirely. And as that realization settled in, something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, but so was strength. From that moment forward, I knew I wasn't just standing before power and danger, I was standing for myself. Ready to negotiate. Ready to fight for my father's life. And ready to face whatever consequences my choice would bring. I stood there, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The mix of dread and determination twisting inside me until I could hardly breathe. I knew then there was no turning back. Every other choice could lead to something catastrophic for my father. After a long silence, I drew in a shaky breath and said, my voice trembling but resolute, "All right, I'll agree to stay here with you. But only temporarily, only to protect my father and to find a reasonable way to resolve all of this. I'm not agreeing to any marriage. Not now. I need time to think. To understand." Adrian's pale blue eyes fixed on me, not angry. Not surprised. But analytical. As though he were quietly assessing the terms of my surrender. A faint smile crossed his lips. Subtle yet knowing. As if he recognized that I wasn't a girl who bent easily and at the same time understood that my choice to move into his world had placed me within reach of his control. He gave a small nod. His voice low and certain. Temporary. Then, you'll stay here. In this house. You'll be protected. Provided for. But there will be rules and a structure to follow. I'll keep your father safe. Sienna, but you must respect the boundaries I set. I need everything to remain contained. I swallowed hard, the relief and fear colliding in my chest. It wasn't the choice I wanted, but it was the only one that kept my father alive. The only path that still gave me a sliver of hope. My eyes drifted around the mansion once more, the soaring ceilings, the gleaming marble floors, the priceless artwork on the walls. Every detail whispered of power and control. A constant reminder that I was entering a world governed by wealth and precision, not mercy. I would have to adapt if I wanted to survive. Adrian guided me down the long hallways, each footstep echoing softly, the sound like a heartbeat reminding me that this was no ordinary home. It was a territory of authority. A place where every movement was observed, every word weighed. Here, rebellion was dangerous, and mistakes could cost more than pride. When we reached the room prepared for me, he opened the door. Inside was a wide, elegant space, warm in tone yet too perfect to feel free. The furnishings were exquisite silk drapes, soft lighting, a bed that looked untouched by real life. Everything about it was designed to make me comfortable. But I knew it also meant I was being contained. Adrian turned to me, his voice deep but softer now, almost gentle. "This is your space. Everything you need is here. I want you to feel safe, but remember, from now on, both you and your father are under my protection and my watch. Any reckless decision could put you in danger." I nodded slowly, my heart still racing, caught between gratitude and unease. My father was safe for now, but I could feel the invisible chains tightening, Adrian's presence lingering even in silence. His cold blue gaze a constant shadow at the edge of my thoughts. I took a deep breath, forcing back the fear. This was just the beginning. I told myself a temporary surrender, a calculated step to win time and security, to learn how to navigate his world without losing myself to it. From this moment forward, I would have to live in Adrian's realm, balancing submission and strategy, protecting my father while holding on to the fragments of who I was. And somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, a spark of determination ignited a quiet promise to myself that I would endure, adapt, and, when the time came, find a way to turn this captivity into strength, to fight for freedom and the future that was still, somehow, mine to claim. On my first day living in Adrian's mansion, I stepped into the vast space feeling both awed and guarded. Every detail, from the gleaming marble floors to the priceless artwork adorning the walls, reminded me with sharp clarity that I had entered a world utterly unlike the cramped, chaotic apartment I had once called home. Marco led me through the long hallways, introducing each section of the estate, the grand library lined with shelves that touched the ceiling, the expansive office with its sleek glass desk, the private gym, and the manicured garden that surrounded a quiet pond where the water shimmered in the sunlight. It was breathtaking and oppressive at once, the kind of beauty that demanded obedience. As I walked, A heavy awareness settled over me that in this place of order and luxury, I was always being watched, and every gesture, every word, could carry weight I didn't intend. When I reached my room, I unpacked my few belongings and sat by the large window overlooking the gardens, realizing that this was not simply a home, it was a fortress. A network of surveillance and quiet control, where my actions could decide not just my fate but my father's safety as well. Adrian appeared at the doorway, his pale blue eyes steady on me, his voice low, calm, and resolute. "You should rest today," he said. "Tomorrow your schedule begins study, work, and adjustment. You'll learn how things operate here. That's the only way you can protect yourself and your father." I nodded, feeling the tremor of anxiety beneath a growing sense of resolve. I understood that adaptation was survival, that if I wanted to endure, I had to learn to live within his world without losing myself to it. The next day, my routine began. Private tutors, carefully selected by Adrian, arrived to continue my architectural studies. They spoke quickly, precisely, challenging me to keep up as we moved from structural design to modern construction theory. The lessons were intense, but for the first time in months, I felt the faint pulse of purpose again. Each concept I mastered, each drawing I completed, was a small act of defiance, a way of proving that I was more than the girl trapped by her father's debt. Adrian had also assigned me to assist with small design projects within his family's business, drafting layouts, refining interiors, reviewing construction proposals. The work was demanding, the pace relentless, yet it filled me with a strange exhilaration. It was pressure and freedom at once, the sense that I was reclaiming pieces of myself, skill by skill, hour by hour. Marco and Adrian's associates were always near, watchful but distant, offering guidance when needed, never letting me forget that this was still Adrian's domain. Their presence was a constant reminder that every decision mattered, that missteps could have consequences, but also that success, however small, could buy me breathing room. Gradually, the fear that had shadowed me began to recede. My days found rhythm: early mornings of study, long hours of design meetings, evenings spent refining blueprints under the soft glow of the library lamps. Slowly, the mansion ceased to feel like a prison and began to feel like a challenge, one I was determined to overcome. At night, when silence fell and the house slipped into its quiet hum, I would sit by the window in my room, watching the garden spread beneath the moonlight, the faint glimmer of the city lights flickering beyond the estate walls. I thought of my old life, the narrow apartment, the scent of cheap coffee and rain leaking through the window frame, my father's trembling hands, and I felt both distant and grateful. This world of marble and glass might be dangerous, but it offered something I hadn't felt in years: a chance to learn, to rise, to turn power and knowledge into armor, to transform fear into strength. And as I gazed into the night, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't just surviving inside Adrian's world, I was beginning, slowly, to master it. In the weeks that followed, I began to realize that Adrian's presence was not defined solely by power or command. It had quietly woven itself into the fabric of my daily life in ways I could no longer deny. At first, every time he entered the room, my heartbeat stumbled, caught somewhere between fear and fascination. His pale blue eyes always held that measured distance, just enough to remind me of the danger he represented, yet close enough to make me feel inexplicably safe. We spent long hours reviewing architectural plans and discussing construction projects. He was patient, composed, often leaning in to point out a line or a curve on a blueprint. His voice calm, his hand steady. There was something in the deliberate grace of his movements, in the quiet authority of his touch on the page, that made me feel secure in a way I hadn't known in years. I started noticing small things about him: the way he scanned every space instinctively, the precision in how he spoke, how he noticed the tiniest details that others would overlook. Sometimes, I would feel his gaze on me as I worked, not watchful in a controlling sense, but protective, as though ensuring that I was safe even in his silence. That awareness settled into my chest like a slow warmth, foreign but strangely comforting. One afternoon, as we walked through a new project site, Adrian paused unexpectedly. His tone was softer, warmer than I had ever heard it. "Sienna," he said, "you're adapting well. I see how hard you're trying. And I respect you more than anyone I've worked with." My cheeks flushed. My pulse quickened. And for the first time, his approval felt like something far more personal than acknowledgement. It was recognition. A quiet, undeniable shift. He was no longer just the man holding my father's fate in his hands. He was beginning to see me as someone capable, determined, human. Evenings became different after that. We often shared dinner in the vast dining hall that once felt cold and intimidating but now seemed softer under the quiet hum of conversation. He spoke of his youth, the weight of expectations, the choices that had hardened him. His voice, deep and steady, carried traces of weariness I hadn't noticed before. And I listened not out of fear or obligation, but with genuine curiosity. The distance between us began to blur, replaced by something fragile and real. One night, as I gathered books in the library, Adrian entered without a sound. His footsteps stopped behind me, and then his hand came to rest gently on my shoulder. The warmth of his touch sent a tremor through me. His voice, low and steady, seemed to echo in the quiet air. "Sienna, you don't have to carry everything alone. I'm here, but I need you to trust yourself, as much as I want you to trust me." I turned to face him, caught between fear and something far more disarming. The steadiness in his eyes, the quiet sincerity behind their cold surface unraveled a tension inside me that I hadn't realized I was holding. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he meant it. Days turned into weeks, marked by long meetings, site visits, and late nights over sketches and plans. Somewhere amid the routine, the boundaries between us softened. It wasn't sudden or obvious, just the subtle rhythm of glances, faint smiles, small gestures of understanding. What had begun as a relationship built on debt and duty was evolving into something unspoken but undeniable, a connection shaped by respect, protection, and quiet vulnerability. I began to feel it in every shared silence, every fleeting moment when his gaze lingered a second too long. There was trust growing there, fragile but real, and beneath it, an emotion I hadn't expected. It wasn't the naive affection of a girl rescued from chaos, nor the fear of a man's dominance. It was something in between, something that trembled between danger and tenderness, power and solace. And I knew, as the days passed and the lines between obligation and emotion blurred, that my heart had begun to shift. Adrian was no longer just the man who held control over my fate. He had become part of my world, part of my thoughts, part of something deep within me that I could no longer ignore. That fog-draped evening, I was finishing up in the mansion's library when Adrian entered. His movements sharp, his pale blue eyes tense in a way I had never seen before, focused, urgent, alive with danger. "Sienna," he said, his deep voice taut but controlled. "Something's wrong. Come with me. Now." The gravity in his tone left no room for hesitation. I stood immediately, my pulse thundering in my ears, dread rising like ice through my veins. Outside, the air was heavy and electric. The garden lights threw long shadows across the lawn, illuminating faint movements beyond the outer fence, shapes shifting in the mist, too deliberate to be the wind. My breath caught. This wasn't a drill, or a false alarm. It was real. The danger Adrian had warned me about had arrived. He ushered me swiftly into a black armored vehicle, his commands precise and steady as Marco and the guards sprang into formation. Their coordination was seamless, an unspoken rhythm of training and readiness. Even through the fear, I couldn't help but be struck by their precision, by the quiet, lethal authority with which Adrian moved. From the bulletproof window, I caught sight of several black SUVs speeding down the hill. Men in tactical gear leaned from the windows, weapons in hand, their movements terrifyingly efficient. My heart seized in my chest. I remembered the name Adrian had whispered once. Late at night, the Bratva, the Russian organization that thrived on chaos, money, and power. And suddenly I understood this wasn't random. They weren't coming for Adrian's fortune, they were coming for leverage. My father, Marco's voice was low and grim as he briefed Adrian. They've been tracking us for weeks. Tonight's their move. They've taken the old man, using him as bait to test your reach. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands trembled as I pictured my father helpless, terrified, bound somewhere cold and silent. Adrian reached for my hand, his grip firm, his tone grounding me through the panic. "Sienna," he said, voice low and unwavering. "You need to stay calm. I'll bring him back, but I need you to trust me completely. No hesitation. Do you understand?" I nodded, the fear in me hardening into something sharper resolve. I wasn't a bystander anymore. This time, I was part of it. My mind raced, replaying everything I'd learned about planning. Observation, precision. I could feel adrenaline coursing through my body, every heartbeat fueling the determination to help, to act. As we neared the coordinates Marco had provided, the SUV slowed. Through the reinforced glass, the outline of a decrepit warehouse emerged from the fog. Figures moved inside shadows, pacing beneath flickering lights. Adrian guided me to focus. "There," he said, pointing. "See the corners. The guards rotate every 40 seconds. That's our window." His tone was calm, clinical, the kind of calm that demanded trust. His team moved with surgical accuracy, setting up flanking positions, silenced weapons ready. From the darkness, I finally saw him, my father, tied to a chair in the center of the room, his face pale under the harsh light, sweat glistening on his forehead. Around him stood men dressed in black, their weapons glinting, their expressions carved from ice. My breath caught in my throat. One wrong move, and he'd be gone. Adrian's gaze locked with mine, cold but steady. "Sienna," he said quietly, "we move now. Every decision matters. Stay beside me. Don't be afraid. Just focus." His words anchored me, slicing through the chaos. For the first time, I realized that the fear burning in my chest could be shaped into strength. I took a deep breath, forcing the trembling in my hands to still. The girl who once hid in a crumbling apartment, terrified and powerless, no longer existed. I wasn't just here to watch. I was here to fight for my father, to trust Adrian, and to stand beside him in the line between life and death. As we stepped from the armored vehicle into the mist, I could hear the thrum of my pulse blending with the rhythmic movements of the guards. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat was part of something far larger than fear, a collision of trust, survival, and the unyielding instinct to protect. And I knew, with a clarity that cut through the fog, that what happened in the next few minutes would decide everything: my father's life, my own safety, and the fragile thread that bound my fate to Adrian's in a world where danger and devotion were indistinguishable. In the days that followed my father's rescue, the world around me seemed to teeter between chaos and uneasy calm. The mansion was quieter now, but silence had its own weight, a heavy, pulsing kind that made every breath feel measured. I spent long hours in my room, sitting by the window that overlooked the garden's endless green, trying to steady the rhythm of my heart that still hadn't recovered from the storm. Yet even as I tried to find balance, something inside me began to change. At first, it was subtle, a wave of nausea that swept through me each morning, a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of rest could soothe, the faint tightening low in my abdomen that made me pause mid-task. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, the aftermath of too much fear compressed into too little time. But when the symptoms lingered, growing more insistent, more undeniable, I felt the first sting of realization. There was something else happening, something I hadn't dared to imagine in this fractured version of my life. One morning, trembling with both fear and necessity, I went into the city. The noise, the lights, the passing strangers all blurred together as I bought a pregnancy test, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. Back at the mansion, I waited minutes that felt like hours, and when the result appeared, 2 unmistakable lines stared back at me. For a moment, the world stilled. My heart seemed to stop. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and terror. The sight was both miraculous and devastating. I sank to the floor, the test trembling in my hand, my thoughts scattered about my father. About Adrian. About the life inside me that had no idea how complicated the world was outside. I stood before the mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. My eyes were wide, the pulse in my throat visible. My expression, a fragile mix of confusion and awe. How could I trust him, Adrian, powerful, calculating, sometimes tender, sometimes as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. Every glance, every word he had spoken, replayed in my mind, now colored by suspicion. Had his protection been real? Or had it been another layer of control? Was I part of a plan I never saw coming? But beneath the fear, memories surfaced unbidden, his voice steady in the midst of chaos. The warmth in his hand when he promised I'd be safe. The quiet in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Those moments didn't feel like strategy. They felt human. And yet, could I afford to believe that I began to pace the room, the marble floor cool under my bare feet, thoughts spiraling faster than I could contain them. Telling him could mean safety, or it could mean surrendering the last shred of independence I had left. Keeping it secret could buy me time, but it could also invite danger if he ever discovered I had hidden something of this magnitude. Every path felt perilous. My hand drifted to my abdomen. Instinctively, protectively. The faintest curve. The smallest promise of life. It felt unreal, and yet so profoundly mine. A strange mix of wonder and dread swept through me. From this moment on, every decision I made would ripple outward to my father, to this child, to Adrian. Trust and fear had become inseparable, and love, if that was what this growing ache for him had become, was tangled somewhere in between. I knew then that my life was no longer just mine to guard. I had to move carefully, think clearly, protect what was coming, even if it meant standing alone. Because this wasn't just about power or debt anymore. It was about survival. About a heartbeat inside me that would soon depend on every choice I made. Choices that could decide not only my future, but his, and the future of the man whose shadow had already changed everything I thought I knew about trust, danger, and love. When the news came that my father was still being held inside the Bratva's warehouse, my heart nearly stopped. Every beat thundered like a warning. The sound of danger closing in. There was no more time to hesitate. Any delay could mean his death. Adrian stood beside me, his pale blue eyes cutting through the dim light, his voice steady and commanding. "Sienna," he said, low and resolute. "There's no way back this time. We move now. Every detail matters. Your father will be brought home alive. I won't allow a mistake." Something in his tone, cold, precision, tempered by conviction, pierced through the fog of fear that had paralyzed me for days. For the first time, I felt not just hope, but faith. Faith that Adrian, with all his power and calm ruthlessness, was the only one capable of bringing my father home. The corridors beneath the mansion led us into a labyrinth of concrete and shadow. Marco and the guards moved ahead in silence, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Every footstep echoed against the bare walls like a heartbeat before a storm. My pulse matched their rhythm fast, sharp, alive. When we neared the outskirts of the industrial district, the metallic clang of a gate closing broke the night, followed by the hum of engines and distant voices. The air turned thick with tension and diesel, the scent of danger almost tangible. In my mind, I saw my father pale, bound, terrified, and the image threatened to undo me. But then Adrian's hand brushed mine, grounding me in a single, wordless command to hold steady. His eyes flicked toward me, steady as steel. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "No sudden moves. Watch everything. We only get one chance." I nodded, gripping my hands together to stop them from trembling. Every instinct screamed to run, to scream, to beg, but I forced myself to trust, to let go of doubt, to believe in him completely. Because in that moment, our lives, my father's life, depended on him. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated walls catching fragments of moonlight. Inside, shadows moved, armed men pacing with the patience of predators. The beams of their flashlights swept across crates, machinery, and finally, faces hard, scarred, and expressionless. Bratva. Their presence was suffocating. a pulse of danger in every breath. Adrian's team fanned out with silent precision. Every step rehearsed. Every movement synchronized like clockwork. Then, in the dim center of the room, I saw him, my father, his hands tied to the arms of a metal chair, his face drawn and pale, eyes wide with fear, my chest constricted. The world narrowed to the sound of my breath and the faint metallic click of weapons being raised. But Adrian didn't flinch. He moved like a shadow swift, calculated, deliberate, his commands short, his focus absolute. The first guard never saw him coming. A single strike. Silent and clean. Marco's men followed suit, neutralizing the others with the same surgical precision. I could barely breathe, my pulse deafening in my ears. Yet beneath the terror, I felt something else rising: strength. The strange, quiet strength that comes when fear turns into purpose. Adrian motioned for me to stay back, then stepped into the center of the room, his movements calm, his authority undeniable. Within seconds, my father was free. The moment his eyes met mine, filled with disbelief, relief, and a flicker of pride, I felt everything inside me unravel. The weight, the fear, the exhaustion, it all dissolved into a single, shuddering breath. As we made our way out, I kept close behind Adrian. Every turn, every step was a test of trust, and he never faltered. The night was alive with danger, but within it, I felt a quiet certainty that we were going to make it. When the last of Bratva's men fell silent and the car doors slammed shut, my body finally allowed itself to tremble, not from fear, but from the realization that we had won. Back at the mansion, the world felt heavier and lighter all at once. Adrian stood across from me, the cold edge in his eyes replaced by something softer: relief. Maybe, or understanding. "He's safe now," he said simply. And I knew it was true. Looking at him then, I understood something I hadn't before, that what tied us together wasn't just circumstance or danger. It was trust forged under fire, belief tested by fear, a bond that had moved beyond survival into something deeper. In his world of power and peril, love was never tender, it was fierce, born in the space between loyalty and courage. And that night, standing beside him, I realized that I no longer feared the darkness, because even there, I had found someone who would fight beside me, not for control, but for the fragile, precious thing we were both trying to protect. The dim light of the warehouse flickered in rhythm with my pounding heart, each breath catching in my throat as I saw Dmitri standing over my father, a cold gun in his hand, his eyes glinting with a cruelty and authority I had never witnessed before. My father was bound tightly to the chair, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes wide with terror as the danger closed in. My own heart hammered violently, as if it might burst from my chest, the world narrowing down to this single, urgent moment, one wrong heartbeat, and my father's life could be stolen in an instant. Adrian stood beside me, his pale blue eyes taut like a drawn bowstring, his voice low but commanding. "Sienna, trust yourself. Now is the time to act. No hesitation." I drew a deep breath, closing my eyes for a fraction of a second, pushing the fear aside. Panic, anger, and the fierce need to protect my father coalesced into a single determination. I was no longer the fragile girl cowering in fear. I was a person facing death head-on to save someone I loved. Dmitri squeezed the trigger. The gunshot cut through the air like a shriek. I dropped to my knees, sliding back slightly, each bullet whistling past. My heart beat so fast, it felt like madness. And in that moment, I saw Adrian move quick, precise, sliding close to me, directing my actions. Every gesture from him was a pulse of survival, a rhythm I had to match to stay alive. When Dmitri lifted the weapon again to threaten my father, I seized the gun Adrian had placed in my hands moments before. My hands shook, but my aim was unflinching, heart frozen and raging simultaneously. Fear and fury and determination merged into a singular focus. I pressed the trigger. The shot rang out, smoke curling in the air, and I felt the recoil as though it carried my entire body with it. Dmitri collapsed, eyes wide with shock, unable to comprehend what had happened. And for a moment the warehouse was silent, save for the ragged breathing and the pounding of my own heart. My father moaned softly, trembling, his eyes wide as they met mine and Adrian's. In that instant, I felt a surge of relief and pride. I had saved him from the very brink of death. Adrian stepped forward, swift and composed, taking the gun from my hands. His pale blue gaze met mine, appraising but not reproachful. His voice was calm, deep. Sienna, you did perfectly. No hesitation, no fear. You saved your father and proved you are stronger than I thought. I nodded, still catching my breath, fatigue and exhilaration colliding in my chest. In that moment, our bond surpassed simple trust. It became a partnership, forged in life-or-death circumstances. A mutual understanding forged in danger. I realized that my strength, courage, and determination had become a weapon, a force I could wield to protect those I loved. With Dimitri lying motionless, Adrian's guards quickly secured the warehouse. I knelt to free my father, untying the ropes and holding him close. Relief and lingering fear battled in my chest as I realized the magnitude of what had just occurred, a lesson in life, in courage, in trust, and in the power of decisive action. From that moment on, I was no longer a helpless girl dependent on others. I had stepped into a world of power, danger, and responsibility, understanding that to protect my family, I must act decisively, without hesitation, and place absolute trust in those worthy of it. Immediately after Dimitri was neutralized, Adrian focused all his attention on dealing with Marco's betrayal, the man who had once been his trusted right hand but had sold us out to the Bratva. I stood nearby, my heart hammering, a mixture of fear and tension tightening in my chest as I watched Adrian summon Marco into a private room within the mansion. The space was dimly lit, cold, and deliberately arranged so that no escape was possible. Every detail, a silent assertion of Adrian's absolute authority and the consequences of betrayal. Marco entered, pale and trembling, his voice quivering as he attempted explanations. Adrian merely nodded once, a subtle gesture that extinguished any pretense of justification. His tone was low, cutting, and absolute. You sabotaged us from within. Marco, betrayal is intolerable. No one in my organization has the right to put others' lives at risk for personal gain. I could feel the quiet but immense force radiating from Adrian, a power that made me both terrified and utterly trusting. It became clear to me that his control and authority were not merely rooted in wealth or manpower, but in his ability to make anyone who erred confront the consequences of their actions. Marco's punishment was thorough. Not death immediately, but the complete stripping away of power, assets, and information, leaving him isolated and closely monitored. Hours of tension followed as he realized that every connection and secret he had relied upon was now useless. From Adrian's pale blue eyes, I could see the resolve and decisiveness behind the consolidation of his authority, and the warning sent to others within the organization. Betrayal would be met with absolute consequence. Meanwhile, Adrian and I meticulously reviewed the entire security plan, projects, locations, and personnel, ensuring no vulnerability remained. Every detail was checked, evaluated, and reinforced. For the first time, I truly felt like a part of the power structure. Not merely someone under protection, but someone actively contributing to the safety and authority of both of us. When the review concluded, Adrian turned to me, his gaze carrying recognition and trust. Sienna, you've proven that you can not only survive but make critical decisions under pressure. We must continue strengthening our power, not just to protect ourselves and our family, but to ensure that no one dares challenge us again. I nodded, exhausted yet invigorated, understanding that from this moment, my relationship with Adrian transcended mere affection or protection. It had become a strategic partnership, a life-or-death alliance where I was learning to make decisions, analyze situations, and contribute to consolidating our position in a world where power and survival are inseparable. Together, we checked each facility, inspected every guard, and re-established protocols. I realized that our coordination sent a clear message: any act of betrayal or challenge would be met with severe consequences. Our power was reinforced not only through strength, but through intelligence, decisiveness, and meticulous control of every detail. In that moment, I felt a profound pride in my new role within a world that was dangerous yet brimming with authority, and I understood that my participation was essential in maintaining both safety and dominance. The day of our wedding finally arrived, and the mansion was bathed in the warm glow of flickering candles and shimmering chandeliers. Every detail had been meticulously prepared, from the delicate white bouquets to the red carpet leading into the private chapel, where we would officially become husband and wife. I wore Adrian's grandmother's wedding gown, carefully tailored to embrace my pregnant body. The dress felt both regal and luxurious, and as I gazed at myself in the mirror, I realized how much I had changed since stepping into his world, from the fragile girl who worried endlessly about my father to a woman ready to stand beside a man of immense power. While also preparing to welcome the new life growing inside me, Adrian appeared in a perfectly fitted black suit, his handsome face chiseled and commanding. His pale blue eyes were still sharp, yet now they carried warmth and pride. When he smiled at me, faint but full of meaning, my heart ached with emotion and complete happiness. As I walked down the red carpet into the chapel, my footsteps light and deliberate, I felt the gazes of admiration, respect, and a trace of fear from the people present, key members of Adrian's organization, allies, and even some former rivals invited with caution. I realized then that this day was not only a personal milestone, but also a moment that reinforced our power and prestige within the dangerous, high-stakes world we inhabited. Standing before Adrian, exchanging vows and rings, my heart seemed to shatter and expand all at once. The months of tension, fear, doubt, and life-or-death decisions cascaded back in memory, and I understood that every hardship had led to this perfect moment. I was not just his wife, I was his partner, his equal in authority, his companion in the life we were about to build together. In the weeks following the wedding, joy mingled with apprehension as my pregnancy progressed. Adrian was always by my side, tending to every meal, every step, every small gesture. His gaze followed me constantly, giving me a sense of security and deepening the quiet bond between us. Respect and trust evolved into a profound, unspoken love, one that radiated strength, protection, and care. When Sophia was born, I was taken into a modern delivery room, attended by a professional medical team. Still, I could feel Adrian just beyond the glass, anxious yet composed, his eyes fixed on me as though transmitting courage and calm. And when our daughter's first cry echoed through the room, the world seemed to pause. My heart overflowed with love and happiness, exhaustion mingling with completeness, knowing that this tiny life was the living proof of the love, sacrifice, and trials we had endured together. Adrian stepped into the room, his large hands cradling Sophia with a tenderness I had never seen before. He whispered gentle, protective words, and in that moment, I felt the bond between the three of us, a newly formed family where power, love, and responsibility intertwined. In that instant, I understood that though the world outside remained dangerous and filled with power struggles, we had created our own space, a realm where affection, protection, and full happiness could coexist. Sophia became a symbol of both love and authority, a living reminder of the path we had traversed and of what lay ahead. Together, we would build a family, a future, and a legacy that no adversity could ever destroy. After Sophia was born, I realized that power and wealth could be used for more than just protecting ourselves and our family. They could be wielded to create meaningful, positive change in the community. Adrian and I began planning a charitable organization, a place where children, struggling families, and even workers within our system could receive genuine support. We decided to expand scholarship programs, covering full tuition for talented children and teenagers who lacked the means from elementary school through university, ensuring that these young people would have the opportunity to change their futures and not be trapped in hardship as I once was. I told myself that Sophia would grow up in an environment where education and opportunity were valued as highly as power and wealth. Our work went beyond scholarships. We purchased and renovated apartments in underprivileged areas of the city, creating safe, clean, fully equipped homes for families in need, places where children could learn, play, and thrive without facing the dangers of their surroundings. I took an active role in designing and overseeing these projects, applying architectural knowledge to optimize space, light, and comfort, transforming them into true homes where love and learning coexisted. Adrian stood by me, providing not only financial support but strategic guidance, ensuring that every project was executed safely and efficiently, that staff were well trained, and that every decision considered both social impact and the broader scope of our influence. I learned to use the power of leadership to create positive change, understanding that authority is not only for protection but also for building, and this brought me a joy and fulfillment unlike anything I had ever felt amid fear, danger, and survival. The organization grew rapidly. Scholarship programs drew widespread community attention. Families came to us for support, and I witnessed the joy, gratitude, and smiles of children, experiences that money and power had never given me. I realized that true strength lies in the ability to create opportunities and hope for others. From that moment, my name, Sienna, became associated not only with family and authority but also with compassion and humanitarian values. We also established emergency funds to assist families affected by natural disasters, illness, or sudden hardship, ensuring they could overcome challenges without being pushed into despair. Adrian stood beside me, making sure every resource was used effectively, and that each action produced a positive ripple through the community. I learned that deep satisfaction and joy come from seeing others rise because of one's own efforts and decisions, a feeling wholly different from the power and authority I had learned from the underworld. Watching Sophia play in one of the newly built communities, I felt that our work was not only providing opportunities for the present generation, but creating a legacy she would grow up understanding the value of education, love, and safety. I felt the intertwining of family, power, and social responsibility become a part of me, a spiritual strength both practical and emotional. From that moment on, our lives were about more than power or protection. They were about building a better world, a place where Sophia and other children could grow, learn, and dream without being constrained by circumstance. And in that realization, my heart overflowed with happiness, pride, and hope for the future. From the highest room in our mansion, I stood gazing out over the sprawling city below. The late afternoon sun slanted through towering buildings, illuminated bustling streets, and cast a warm glow across the lush green gardens. A sense of calm and power washed over me, and I realized that the young girl who had once struggled with debt and fretted endlessly over her father had now walked through life or death trials, faced dangerous adversaries, and confronted impossible choices to become a woman, standing beside power, protecting her family, while building a future for her child and the wider community. Sophia slept peacefully in Adrian's arms, his pale blue eyes soft with tenderness and pride as he watched her, and in that moment, I felt the convergence of love, protection, and responsibility into a steady, enduring strength. I understood that true power does not come solely from influence or wealth, but from the ability to create change, to offer opportunities, education, and hope to those around you. I thought of the charitable projects, the scholarships, the safe housing we had built, of the children now able to dream and pursue a future unbound by circumstance. A deep joy filled me knowing that my choices and efforts had created a tangible impact not just for my family, but for the wider community. Adrian stood beside me, his gaze carrying warmth beneath its usual intensity, and I felt the partnership, trust, and unconditional love that had grown between us. I understood that our relationship was rooted in mutual respect, shared power, and responsibility, every decision carefully weighing the safety, happiness, and future of our family, and this brought me a sense of fulfillment, empowerment, and freedom I had never imagined before. Looking to the future, I saw a world full of possibilities where Sophia would grow up surrounded by love, fully educated, able to make her own choices, and understand the value of perseverance, courage, and compassion. I recognized that my responsibility extended beyond protecting my child. It was also to inspire and create opportunities so others could rise as well. A meaning far deeper than power or wealth alone. My life had transformed from a girl threatened by debt and danger into a queen of influence in a world I had learned to navigate, turning it into a tool for protection and creation. I understood that every challenge could become a stepping stone if approached with trust, decisiveness, and responsibility. And the greatest lesson I had learned was that true strength comes from protecting what matters, creating positive change, and standing firm in the face of difficult choices. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe, like, and share the YouTube channel Underworld Love Stories to experience more compelling videos every day. And share your comments so we can hear how this story connects to your own life. I look forward to learning how you relate to these events. Goodbye, and see you in the next video. I wish everyone watching good health, happiness, and peace. And remember that every challenge can be overcome when we trust ourselves and those worthy of that trust. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.